This is the Weekly Music Business Show for December 21st, 2015, Episode 3. This week we discuss the current crop of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees.
Yeah, and we also hit the CRB's new streaming rates.
And we talk endlessly about Apple Music, where they are right now and where they'll be in 2016. This is the Weekly Music Business Show. All right, and welcome to the Weekly Music Business Show for December 21st. How are things going for you, Chris?
Oh, holiday edition. It's going good.
Star Wars Holiday Edition.
Oh, yes. The Force is with me.
Did you watch the Democratic debates, how Hillary Clinton ended the debates with, "And may the Force be with you"? I thought that was very...
No.
Oh, yeah, it was the last line of the debates on Sunday night, or Saturday night. "May the Force be with you." It was like, that was a really cheap ploy for some last-minute votes. But,
wow.
You know, I mean, got to respect that. So.
Some focus group guy was like, "And make sure you include this as your sign-off."
Absolutely. Probably worked. I'm sure she got some points there with the teenagers or something.
Wow.
Maybe not. I don't know. So yes, the all-holiday Star Wars edition of the Weekly Music Business Show. I just want to remind everyone up front that you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, SoundCloud, anywhere that wonderful podcasts are available. Whatever Overcast app, you can search for us and find us and subscribe, and we really appreciate you sharing that with your friends. All right, onward to the news.
Dun dun dun. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees. What do you watch? Give us the blow by blow there, Dave.
All right, so the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame came out with their annual list of inductees. It's a little bit smaller class than in previous years. There's only 5 inductees. I think usually it's somewhere, closer to 8, 9, 10, a dozen in that range. So this year we're going to see Cheap Trick, Chicago, Deep Purple, Steve Miller, and the great classic rock and roll band NWA inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I believe, I'm not even sure when that happens, sometime in early 2016. They have their dinner.
Yeah, it's good Midwest showing. You got to say,
yeah.
With Cheap Trick in Chicago, it's almost like they had to, from Cleveland say, well, we're going to go borrow from the 312, just a little, a couple zip codes to the west of us here, and get 2 good Midwest bands on that list. I don't know about. First of all, how do you feel about? Do you feel about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame similar to how you feel about the Grammys?
Well, I think this topic comes up, I see in social media every year around this time, where you get 2 camps. You get the people who get just furious about the list of inductees, because there's always someone, I think it was Green Day last year, NWA this year, where it's like, they're not a real rock and roll band, like, we need to keep this pure. How can they be overlooking XYZ band? And that was not a Rush reference. How can they be overlooking such and such and put in, NWA or something like that? And then the other half of the side says that, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame shouldn't even exist. It's just a ploy to get you to pay attention to and spend more money on rock music. And I guess I see it a little bit in the middle, where I say, yeah, of course it is. It's a marketing campaign to help people stay engaged with rock music. And what's wrong with that? Let's get more people interested in music. We need more events that are based around music to keep people's interest. If you want to have a throwdown battle about who should be inducted and who should not be inducted, I think that's up to you. I don't really want to be involved. I think it's just a fun thing for me. I don't really want to be involved in that sort of argument. I don't think anything good will come of it. They're not going to listen to my opinion. They're not going to listen to anyone's opinion.
Yeah. What bugs me sometimes about ceremony and music is that, and this could go for Grammys, it can go for the American Music Awards, it can go for Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It seems sometimes like it's just so self-congratulatory. And obviously, did NWA get the nod because of the movie, this year?
Yes.
can we point our fingers and say conspiracy? I don't know. And is it that 2016 might have been the year that they were like, gosh, we got slim pickings here, so we just don't, fall off the face of, trying to be relevant. Let's throw NWA into the mix, and now we've, got ourselves a little bit more mind share or something. I don't know. As far as the picks, I like Cheap Trick. I can't say everything they did was a hit, but Rick Nielsen, Robert Zander, those guys, Bunny Carlos, those for me were, kind of off the beaten path, cultural, icons,
Right.
Rick Nielsen with that crazy, set of guitars and onstage thing. And, but if you listen to their albums, you get a couple, maybe one good single, and then a lot of stuff that's just like, ugh.
Yeah, I can't say that, I'm young enough that I wasn't really interested in Cheap Trick when I don't know when they kind of stopped producing original music. Do they still put out records? Do you know?
They had a record out a couple years ago that I think was called Rockford.
Okay. I know they're still playing, or at least had been in not too distant past, but I can't say that I've ever owned or streamed a Cheap Trick record from beginning to end. Of course, I've played their songs in various cover bands. It's hard to be a cover band and not play I Want You to Want Me.
Okay, there you go.
Or some of the I've played a few other ones.
Surrender.
Surrender, yeah.
I had a band that covered Dream Police.
Nice.
Which was, ambitious on a number of levels. But, the interesting thing here is that, did you know that Rick Nielsen is a, I don't know if he's a majority investor, but he, Reverb.com.
Yeah.
So Rick Nielsen has actually got money and is involved with them.
Nice.
And, they're based in Chicago, so that kind of makes sense. But
sure.
I saw a really nice story just a couple weeks ago about Rick Nielsen. He's done a couple of auctions for his gear, some of it for charity, and some of it is just, I've got too much stuff. And they've all been handling through Reverb.com. But, I think that's kind of a cool thing because Reverb.com, a topic for another discussion, but is kind of a for musicians, by musicians eBay.
Great site.
I know that they're doing really well in terms of they continue to get profiled well by investors groups, advocates that say, hey, this is a good investment, this is not so good investment,
And even if you're just like a normal musician looking to sell some gear, they have absolutely wonderful customer service, something you will never get out of eBay. If you have someone who's not paying after you sell something, they'll actually talk to you over the phone and say, hey, we'll reach out to them, we'll contact them for you. And they do all of that monkey work to make sure that you're not tracking down, Joe Blow that bought your item and then decided at the last second they didn't want to pay. They'll take care of that for you, which just as a normal guy selling, a used pedal or something that I don't want anymore, makes me just so relieved. And the fees are, to top it off, the fees are less than eBay. You don't
really?
Have to,
I've never done a transaction on Reverb.com.
There's no listing fee. I think they take like 3.5% after you sell. And that's it. It's like, it's not, I think eBay, after you include the PayPal stuff, they're taking pretty close to 10%, maybe even a little bit above that. So yeah, definitely a big fan of Reverb. Do quite a bit of stuff on there, actually.
That's cool. So what about Deep Purple and Steve Miller? Rock and Roll Hall of Fame worthy material here, or?
Oh, I think Deep Purple, without a doubt. I can't say, Steve Miller's like one of those artists for me. Again, I'm 34 years old, so when Steve Miller was huge, I wasn't really listening to, but they're one of those bands that come on the classic rock station. I'm like, oh, I love this song. Who is this? Oh, it's Steve Miller. They've got a big stash of great songs that I just I'm not part of that generation that really was into, the Steve Miller. Deep Purple for me seems like a no-brainer. It's the iconic first guitar riff, right? When you're thinking about this in terms of how it's
Smoke on the Water, just for listeners that might not be familiar, if you're like a keyboard or violin background.
I think, yeah, see, that's the beautiful thing about it is you almost don't need to say what song it is. Everyone kind of knows. Sure, Deep Purple's catalog runs deep, and they've been a band for a long time, and they continue to put out great music. But you can't get, I think I just saw them on the Today Show earlier this year, like in the summer, and they still played Smoke on the Water on the Today Show. So it's like that is their staple, and if they had done nothing else, I still think that would cement their place in history. There was actually a really funny article on Blabbermouth, which is a little bit more of a, I guess, kind of scandal website. They like to stir up a lot of controversy in terms of musician news, not really the hard-hitting, deep industry stuff. But Ian Gillan, the lead singer of Deep Purple, had a funny quote. He said, what a coincidence. This morning I got an invitation to a wedding from some dear old friends. Unfortunately, my family was not invited, and they said I would be required to sit next to my ex, and we divorced decades ago. At the wedding feast, they were shocked when I called them to thank them and declined them for the invitation. So the backstory on this is they've inducted the first 3 versions of Deep Purple, but not the one that has been touring for 25, 30 years, which includes Steve Morris and Don Airey. I mean, I can understand exactly what he's saying. Like, hey, I don't want to, the same thing happened, with Guns N' Roses had an issue with past members. Kiss has had issues with members at their induction. So this is like, more of the same old drama. I don't know how the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame can handle it any better, whether they just say, all right, anyone who's ever been associated with any band that's been inducted is now inducted, or they stick to their guns. To me, I don't really care. Like, I'm never going to go to one of these ceremonies. Whether Steve Morris is associated with the Deep Purple that's in the Rock Hall or has just been known as their guitar player for the last 2 decades, to me, it's splitting hairs.
Yeah, what's funny to me is I've never been a Steve Miller fan. I've always thought like, and this is just opinion, folks. So
you don't love the Joker?
No. In fact, it's tough for me to listen to that stuff and just go, how delightfully average is his material. However, what's hilarious to me is this is flame me now. I love the Fountains of Wayne. I think Adam Schlesinger is just amazing. He's got a great pop sensibility, kind of wrapped in this kind of wonderful, kind of power pop kind of feel. And when I went to see them live, they actually say, here's where we're going to do a medley of tunes that kind of inspired us. And they went through a handful of Steve Miller tunes, a handful of Cars tunes. And it was just like, in that context, Steve Miller was like, oh, cool, kind of excited. Everything else, I was just like, yeah. So yeah, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, great, good luck. Cleveland rocks. Woo! That's awesome, but I'm ready to be done with the self-congratulatory, rock and roll, blah, blah, blah. It's just whatever, guys.
Yeah, just move on. All right, so in our next topic, we're going to talk about streaming rates and royalties, which I admit, and Chris, you were saying in the pre-show that, this gets to be kind of a dry topic, but really what could be more important to aspiring songwriters, to aspiring performers that are wondering, how will we be paid in the future? So the CRB came out with a ruling this year, and the CRB stands for the Copyright Royalty Board, and it's a ruling based on the royalty rates for webcasting, and it's important because there's a bit of a conflict. Labels and artists want to have higher rates; they want to be paid more, and then digital services like Pandora and iHeartRadio want to be paying less when they play songs. They don't want to have to pay high fees so that they can make more profit. So the CRB are the people that are deciding this for our industry. So who are they? Well, it's a group of 3 copyright judges. This whole idea of a CRB was established in 2005, and their only job is to set rates and terms for copyright statutory licenses. So the jobs are permanent. These judges are not elected. They're appointed by the Library of Congress. So in a nutshell, what they have decided is that streaming services will come out ahead. They're going to give them lower rates than what the labels were hoping for. So here's some specifics. Pandora is going to pay 0.0017, 17 hundredths of a penny, 17 hundredths of a dollar per play in 2016, which is an increase of 21.4%. You might say, whoa, 21%, that's a great increase from the current rate of 0.0014 streams per song. Now, and that is a decent increase, but what they didn't do is include an annual increase. So from 2017 to 2020, the royalty increase will, instead of being a set increase, it will be changed at the rate of the consumer price index. And as of the last 12 months, the consumer price index hasn't changed enough to necessitate any sort of increase. So we're looking at the potential for the rate to stay the same all the way from next year, which starts, in a few weeks, up through 2020, which, the artists are saying, wait a minute, this is not fair. We need to make sure, Sound Exchange is representing the music industry, and they're saying, hey, that's not enough. And Pandora and the other streaming services are going, yeah, this seems like it's a fair compromise. I think everyone won on this issue. So Chris, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this, and I've tried to kind of just summarize it, give it the broad strokes, because I know unless you're in the industry and really like paying attention to the specifics, this gets boring. Like even someone who cares, you go read the articles and it's like, what are they saying? 0.0011, this isn't even a tangible amount of money to most people. I think it's like, 8 plays will get you a penny, something like that.
Yeah, and the tough thing about this conversation is it is confusing just to try and, number one, it involves Washington, D.C. and anything that goes through Washington, I'm sorry, but my paranoia antenna is just pinged. Bloop, 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 bloop. Yeah, I mean, so there's first of all, we can go back to who are these 3 judges and who appointed them. Well, they're, the Library of Congress set these guys up, and you're just like, well, when did the Library of Congress really understand, commerce? Really, yes, we have protections that are afforded under the Library of Congress when it comes to copyright, but it's like when so much about copyright is changing so fast in terms of how people want to use and expect to use copyright and will use regardless of what copyright law may or may not be. It's a little frustrating. And the tough thing about this is, we have a couple of big players in this pie. Pandora, to me, being the biggest, I want to say offender. I know, we know that, Pandora's had some things kind of hurled at them in terms of, whether or not they are self-seeking, whether or not they are being a little too heavy with their lobbying pressure. I'm not a big Pandora fan, just because I think their whole model is kind of crummy. It's free music for people who don't care about music.
Right. And that's why they're popular, right? Yeah. Is that, they are huge. They are still a huge brand. People that don't, give 2 craps about Spotify listen to Pandora religiously because they just type in the artist that they like and it comes up with other songs like it. It's the radio. It's the replacement for the radio. People really enjoy it. I'm on your side, Chris. I don't want someone else to tell me what I should listen to next. I care enough about my collection and what goes through my ear holes that I will, be happy to find an album and listen from beginning to end. But I don't think we're in the majority here. I think a lot of people do like having, that's why television is still somewhat popular. You can put on a channel and it just plays shows for you. And you don't have to think.
Yeah. It's difficult because I think, here's what's hard is Pandora was tanking in terms of, just kind of holding on to their investors and holding on to, what they've got going on Wall Street. This ruling comes out, their stocks soar, and now they're cutting direct deals with, I'm getting notifications like at least daily that they've cut a direct deal, which bypasses all of this CRB discussion. So It's like they lobbied to get a low rate, and then they're going to cut a direct deal. And on one hand, so just to explain what these direct deals are, I think the most famous direct deal is that, Taylor Swift, bring up her name again, cut a direct deal directly with iHeartMedia at one point. It might even been Clear Channel still at the time, for, her streaming stuff, whatever. The iHeart thing has a couple of different strings to it because they do own broadcasting in major cities all over the U.S. So iHeart's got, it's a multi-headed animal. Pandora, on the other hand, with these direct deals, what happens is the tough thing when direct deals in some ways can be the fairest deal for everyone involved because it allows for potentially the rates to be agreed on by both sides. But what happens in a direct deal is a lot of times you get private rates. And so because Pandora knows what they're paying everybody, and they may set a value for, well, if publisher X has headline names, but publisher Y only has a couple one-hit wonders, they can, they are somewhat forced to give a better rate to publisher X, and then to publisher Y, they cut a different deal. And it sets up this class structure that can really undermine the backbone of music publishing where it really hurts, which is the people that are involved on the creative process that actually create the content that's being used and generated.
So you have to wonder, and maybe you have some insight into this, why would any publisher want to do a private deal if they're not going to be getting more money than the CRB has set up? And if they were going to get more money, then why would Pandora want to do that deal? Why do these deals exist at all?
So, I can't really speak to a ton of experience other than...
See, that's I think where the paranoia antennas go off, right? Why they shouldn't need to. So there's something else that's going, in with the deal to make it interesting for both parties, right? There has to be.
Well,
we don't know.
Yeah, and the thing that gets it is that for a label like or for something like Pandora, yes, they could work by the minimums, but sometimes the terms on the minimums, like you said, even if the CPI doesn't move, right, the consumer price index doesn't move and it stays flat, the risk is that it might not. And Pandora stockholders are going to want to see growth quarter over quarter. And the way that Pandora can get around or get guarantees about this and say, hey, Wall Street, we've got this locked up for 5 years, regardless of what happens in the market. In terms of, if we hit inflation or we hit a shock, we're going to be great. Because why? Because we cut a deal that's only 0.001% or 0.002% over. But what happens is Pandora will outlay cash for an entity, a label, a publisher, or a rights holder. And that rights holder is not going to walk away from cash. Fortunately, everybody likes that. That's what talks. And so it's in some cases, is it cutting your nose off to spite your face? It's hard to say. It's just that the private deals, because you don't see into them, it can be really tricky for everybody else. It's like, well, I got my payment, so
right.
It's not necessarily screw you, but it's like you're on your own negotiating terms. I've done some work working around licensing where it was like, you have this thing that's called, most favored nation status, where basically it forces your negotiation. So whatever your top bracket is, if you do have say you have a tiered system for licensing, you want X amount of content, or maybe it's like 5 songs, and you're working with 3 different entities in publishing, MFN status makes sure that you have to, one party says, well, if we find out that you paid the other party X, then retroactively you have to catch us all the way back up. So, MFN just puts everybody on the table saying we're all getting the same rate.
Yeah.
The tough thing is that can, if you take that off the table, well, people hate that because it's just like, well, I got to pay the same rate for Adele that I do for some,
for say my songs,
a Cheap Trick record. Yeah,
there you go.
I like Cheap Trick. I'm not trying to throw you guys
Sure.
under the bus, but and it's like it just
supply and demand, though, right? I mean, Adele's the rage, Cheap Trick.
But
the
nice thing about having statutory structures is that it establishes this continuity, right? This continual floor that you can't undermine with private agreements. This is just the Wild West, and this CRB thing is just like, who knows if this is going to be relevant in 9 months? It's just, yes, they got, and the fact that iHeart and Pandora, led the discussions in this is just, that to me is just garbage. I'm sorry, but I'm just like, it's like, telling the thieves, okay, here's where the security system is, and we trust you that you're not going to screw with this before you walk into our bank.
I think Pandora had an earnings call very shortly after the ruling, and so their CEO was able to brag a little bit about what they had accomplished in terms of, and he actually spouted off and said some kind of rude things about Apple, and then later backtracked on that too. But that's, I guess, a whole other story. So this doesn't affect. So Pandora recently acquired the intellectual property from the failed RDO, right? So RDO is basically out of business or shortly. I don't know if they've shut down yet, but they will be soon. And Pandora has picked up their streaming service. So it's assumed that at some point in the near future or not so near future, Pandora will also implement a feature that's similar to Apple Music and Spotify, where you can choose your own song and build playlists and listen to complete albums. And it's kind of hard to understand maybe from the outside, but these rates don't affect those types of services, right? This is just for the streaming, kind of radio type of service, right? Where you go on, you click a button to hit play, and then songs come on. This isn't the same thing as the Apple Music rate.
Correct. From what I can understand here, and what's difficult about this is that's maybe what's most troubling is the fact that there's a business philosophy that talks about friction and how certain levels of difficulty, make your running your business or selling your goods to a customer more difficult or less difficult to the point where the transaction doesn't happen. Right. And when we have so many different rates that are, where there's the direct deal, there's the CRB statutory deal, we have streaming versus this subscription streaming. It's bonkers to wrap.
And then there's free versus ad supported.
Yes.
Subscription versus ad supported as well, which adds basically doubles the different number of rates that there are. And it is, for an average musician that's trying to do this independently, man, to do your own accounting on this, good luck.
And
you get your statement and go, I hope they're right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where it gets concerning in terms of, there's no way that you can really prove it, but that the fix is in. And potentially, here's what really bothers me about this CRB thing is how this money gets split up. Traditionally, and people can argue about this both ways, but traditional royalties get paid to, basically the creator and the publisher, whoever owns those rights. Mm-hmm. There's been a discussion about, we need to pay the performer that's doing this because a lot of times, Katy Perry isn't singing songs that Katy Perry wrote, or whatever. I mean,
is not performing the drum track.
Exactly. And so there's been some concern about, well, how do we compensate the performers because they're kind of getting cut out of this? That's a different discussion. I would be, and the thing is like this could be an opportunity to say we're going to split this amongst these three entities. Here's how this gets split up, and what drives me insane, right? So that, so the statutory rate is determined by the CRB judges and is paid to whom? Sound Exchange, which is a Washington, D.C. Library of Congress operation. Have you ever dealt with Sound Exchange?
I've kind of just ignored it, to be honest. Like we've done licensing deals and for artists that I've worked with, and I guess I'm leaving money on the table, but I just didn't. I looked at the website and go, oh, this is something I should pay attention to. I'll do it later, and then never came back to it. So I'm sure you have more experience than I do.
Well, I don't have a ton of experience other than to say, like, I got this email from something saying, hey, you should register with Sound Exchange, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I received the same email.
I've got a number of works that, if you're sitting out there that could probably, I don't know if somebody's grabbed them and used them for something else. And Sound Exchange is supposed to kind of be involved as if people don't know who the royalty goes to, they pay Sound Exchange. Sound Exchange promptly sent me an email back saying, basically, screw you, who the hell are you, go away. You know?
It's funny because they solicit you with kind of this Ed McMahon, you may already be a millionaire type of offer. Like, you've got money for uncollected royalties, we're saving it for you. And then once you sign up, they're like, oh, no, sorry, wrong guy.
So I'm already like suspicious about this whole CRB rate. But the deal is that basically 50% goes to the master rights owner. 45% goes to the artist that recorded the music. So that kind of gets us around this, you know, how do we do
Performance
the performance
royalty?
deal? Yeah. And then 5% to musicians, generic, via their unions.
Ooh. Are you a member of a music union, Chris?
No. Are you?
No, no one is, unless you're like maybe in an orchestra or.
And to me, that reeks of just of political money grab. You know,
Absolutely.
It's just like the union got their nose into this tent, and now they're just like. And granted, you know what? I understand that musicians' unions are supposed to protect them, are supposed to do things that are beneficial. I once had a session with a oddball trombone player who told me that he will always belong to the musicians union because he got thrown off of a tour in the middle of Oklahoma. He called the number on the card and they had somebody out there to pick him up the next day.
Wow.
That's wonderful. I've never, ever, ever heard of the musicians union doing anything other than that. They haven't done anything for me. It's either, well, you know, it's just like,
it's run by musicians. So, I mean, what do you expect? No one's going to have their stuff together. Everyone's sleeping in and drinking whiskey.
Yeah, we can only hope that it's being run by musicians. Okay, CRB, bloody blue. We're going to revisit this, I know, at a later date when we're all going to be like, we thought this was supposed to be taken care of in December of 2015, and now it's a terrible mess. Here's where I stand on this whole thing, is that somebody actually needs to come up with a workable system, and whether or not it's like using blockchaining or something, I don't care. But somebody's going to come up with a workable system that doesn't involve Washington, D.C. That's where it's the mutual benefit of the usage is such that everybody is saying to each other, let's not screw each other because it's better if we work together. I believe there's a solution out there. Obviously, if I had it, I would not be doing this podcast.
That's right.
I'd be sitting on a pile of wonderful cash and smiling, lovely faces surrounding me, but that's not here or there right now.
It's such a frustrating topic for so many musicians. I mean, we'll probably talk more about this in the future, like you said, but this has kind of been the year of producers and writers coming out and saying, hey, I streamed, my song was streamed 12 billion times on Spotify and I got paid $7.33. So this definitely needs to be resolved in the near future.
Totally.
All right. Shall we move on?
Yeah, let's do it. So Apple Music, there's a couple of things that we've got here in, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's do this Apple Music thing before we go to our favorite subject, which seems to be Adele lately. So there's a couple of Apple Music news pointers that are actually, I don't know. So we've got the Taylor Swift Live 1989 tour that was exclusive for Apple. Had a little bit of trouble.
Did you watch the show?
I did not.
No, I didn't either. I didn't even try. But I guess if I had tried, I would have had problems.
I guess. So for people who are unfamiliar with what happened, surprise, surprise, Apple had some trouble streaming to everybody that wanted to see it. They had some trouble with some hardware sets. It's kind of messy. If you've had any experience with Apple streaming live video, the big kind of inside joke is WWDC, which happens in July of every year. WWDC, is where they launch sometimes new product announcements, and their keynote addresses are the stuff nerds just love to stream.
It's Christmas morning, man.
Oh man! And what happens is you get something that looks like a Skype crash hangover. Jumped off of a cliff.
And the last few years have been really good. It seemed as though Apple kind of had their stuff together in terms of the streaming video thing, but it was maybe 2 years ago at WWDC when everything just kind of the S hit the fan, it was, I think there was like subtitles or like someone speaking in Japanese over the announcement. Nothing was working, and then it would like cut away to random footage of like, color squares or whatever they're called, color bars. So yeah, that was the running joke that you're talking about. And in previous events, it's crashed, it's been unstable, but that 1 year where it was just like, what is going on? Who's running the stream here? But I mean, these are huge events, right? It's kind of unprecedented that you get that. It doesn't even have to be the geeks, honestly. Everyone loves iPhones. It's the center of our culture. Musicians don't want to admit that, but soccer moms love new technology as just as much as geeks do these days. So everyone wants to see what the new iPhone's going to look like. And probably at a similar level, this Taylor Swift thing is going to attract every 13 to 17-year-old girl on the planet at this point. I'm sure they had just a massive amount of technology. And the fact that it was down for like the first 2 hours is kind of the reports that, hey, we can't get in right away, or it's crashing. That sucks, right? They fixed it. I checked it just before the show. I was able to pull it up, no problem. But here's what really irks me. They don't allow you to go full screen if you're watching on an iPad. You watch windowed, like there's about 3 inches on every side of the video.
And not the windowing we were talking about a couple episodes ago.
No. And you can't AirPlay it to an Apple TV unless you have the current generation of Apple TV, the 4th generation that just came out a couple months ago. This is not Steve Jobs' Apple. He would have not allowed, and I am a Tim Cook supporter, and this isn't a technology podcast, but Steve Jobs would never have allowed this to have shipped. I mean, he would have gone berserk. What? You can't watch a video? You can't watch a video on an Apple TV? It's not supported to play video on the only... By the way, I was wrong. I need to correct myself. In the last podcast, I was a little PO'd because I couldn't find music videos on Apple TV. I guess if you just keep scrolling long enough, there's not a video section. But if you scroll down in the Apple Music app, it eventually just shows you some music videos. So they're there. Maybe they've been there all along. Maybe they came in an update. I'm not really sure, but they are there.
So I'm not defending Apple. They don't need my defense. But in terms of this huge event, I was looking for numbers, and I don't know that I actually saw like quantifiable numbers on what the demand was on this, but there is something, the problem, that when you have to dish out lots and lots of on-demand video, even Netflix, I think, was it season 2?
Orange is the New Black or whatever. And Game of Thrones would crash for HBO.
Yeah.
It's like,
this
is hard stuff.
This is not, this is lots and lots, this is vast amounts of data going out. And so that can be problematic, as Apple has proven. It's not necessarily, they are not Comcast. They're not some kind of network that has, kind of boxes networked throughout, the U.S. Apple's working on
they
somebody
do have
else's
server farms, and
yeah, they do.
they have some dough behind them.
And they say that that the actual what runs the backbone of a lot of this stuff, this is going to be crazy. This is going to sound nuts, but it's baseball, pro baseball's network.
Yeah,
that actually is doing a lot of this.
MLB
work.
is. Yeah, they've actually started their own company now, and they've been hired out by NHL, and I think HBO hired them to run the HBO Now division, not the HBO Go. So yeah, MLB is somehow kind of cracked the code on this. But Apple uses their own in-house thing. They're not, they don't like to grab technologies from other companies unless they absolutely have to. So they've got their own QuickTime streaming protocol, and I don't know enough about the technicalities to go deeper than that, but just to say that, if HBO can do it, doesn't necessarily translate to Apple can do it, because they do it their own way. It's got its own set of wonderfulness and disaster all encapsulated into their protocol.
And here's the insidious potential thing, is that maybe this is a test. Maybe Apple's just looking and saying, okay, how robust is our on-demand video, and what, but determining the nature of the crash, they can go back and say, okay, here's where we have to, here's where the weaknesses are. We got to build it better. And maybe,
that's a really public beta there. I mean, that's,
Either that or they underestimated the success of this event. But the other side of this that's tough is that sometimes licensing deals make it difficult. Talking about the iPad windowing and the different generations of Apple TV.
Well, not being able to, I understand what you're saying about licensing. So your point is that, not being able to stream it to an Apple TV, that could be related to like, copyright protection, licensing. But come on, I'm on my own device. Why can't I watch it full screen?
Because
that's insane.
Your device might be, well, on your iOS device, it certainly should be. But, it's like, but that could be a bandwidth issue.
They're trying to sell more iPad Pros, so you have a bigger screen because then when you watch it, and it's going to be the size of a regular iPad by the time.
They're awesome. Those iPad Pros they're nifty. I've had a chance to work on one, and they're kind of cool. So, okay, Apple Music hits 8 million subscribers.
Yeah,
Tell me about this, dude.
Speculation is that it's going to go from 8 million to 20 million the next year, and I think this ties in with the the Taylor Swift thing. They're doing all sorts of exclusive things to drive traffic to their service to get people to try that free 3-month trial. I would be super curious to see how many people signed up for the free trial just for that broadcast, just for that concert, that are then going to convert. The statistics show that about 60% of people who sign up for the free trial end up becoming paid subscribers. Whether they choose to become paid subscribers or they're paid subscribers simply because they didn't know how to turn off the service and then eventually figure it out. Who knows? But they are doing awesome. I mean, they're going to be the number 2 paid music subscription service by the end of next year. All analysts seem to believe. And this is despite the fact that the app itself is almost unusable by anyone who isn't a super nerd. So, I mean, Apple Music is, just because it's built into so many devices, it's hard for them to fail at this. And
go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say that I just finished reading the Isaacson books on Jobs, and he made some Jobs talks in the book about how when the iPod came out, they kind of had this revelation, and this is old hat for people who follow technology. They had the halo effect, right? So they figured out they could spend the entire budget of a new iMac in advertising to promote the iPod, which at that point was, a non-existent product. It wasn't it didn't have the market share. It didn't have even the potential to grow. There was no one out there that was selling iPods or any iPod-like device in any sort of volume. But they poured $75 million into this marketing campaign, and then all of a sudden they found that their Mac sales were rising. So because they own the whole picture, that end-to-end way that they provide for their customers, they're able to just do crazy things like give Taylor Swift an exclusive and probably pay her a ginormous sum of money, knowing that that's going to trickle down into more iPhone sales, into more iPad sales, into more Mac sales, and more subscriptions. So, I mean, I don't see how someone like Spotify can actually, in 5-10 years, man, that's brutal, because what do they got? They have to sell the subscription and make money on that.
Yeah, the 8 million subscribers, I think, is a great. It's a good bank. If it goes to 20 million, it's a good chunk of people. People can flame me and say I'm an Apple fanboy. I'm a fanboy of things that work and things that can do it as simple as possible. Apple seems to deliver. I think having Apple Music with a good ton of subscribers means it puts Apple more in the driver's seat for maybe coming up with some solutions that might be simpler than the CRB. If they cut direct deals. I read a delightful piece today about someone who had their publishing thing cut a direct deal with Apple, and things were very, very fair, kind of across the board. I think that's great. I think obviously it helps Apple's bottom line, but there's another company that does this as well. That company is Disney. And, Ben Thompson today in his Stratechery email outlined the fact that, Bob Iger is following a plan that was laid in 1957. And the only wrinkle about why it's having issues is because ESPN. Right. Because they have to spend so much for licensing. But it's a pretty, this is not this isn't new voodoo. It's just one of those deals where if you can deliver something over and over again to a customer on a couple of different touch points, you're so much better off than if you're a single user, a single, if you only provide a single thing.
Absolutely.
It's pretty great. So.
And things could get better for Apple. There was an announcement. Not an announcement. That would be a bit presumptuous. There is a rumor going around that the Beatles are going to appear on iTunes on Christmas Eve. Now, I mean,
on the streaming side.
On the streaming side, yeah. So they are already available for purchase on iTunes, but it'll be available for streaming on Apple Music. Actually, the rumors went a little deeper than that. They kind of said, well, maybe it'll be available on other services such as Tidal and Spotify. You have to think that with the connection that Steve Jobs had to Apple Records, they paid him off multiple times. I think 3 times in total. They had to pay off Apple Music over the years. I would imagine there's going to be some exclusive there. Apple's the only horse in the game that has the cash to put something out there to make something like this happen, right?
You can say that again.
So, I mean, it'll be really interesting. Maybe we'll all get a Christmas present from Apple in a couple of days here. We'll find out. I mean,
what? My phone had plenty of capacity. Now I can't store my pictures.
Yes, they will just download it for you like the U2.
Like the U2
album.
record. Well, I'll be streaming my own Beatles from a turntable probably sometime Christmas Day. I think this is it. To me, it's interesting. It's a sidelight. I think if you like Beatles stuff, the fact that it's streaming isn't a big deal. But
well, I think it is a big deal for everyone who's under 25. If you already have your Beatles collection, you're set. You have your records. A lot of people have them ripped onto their iTunes account. Or
you call me an old fuddy-duddy here?
Yes, no. But you know what I'm saying? To a lot of people that are of the generation that never paid for music, if it's not available for streaming, it doesn't exist. So if the Beatles are going to continue their unprecedented ability to be both important in the society and kind of non-existent, right? I mean, there's not been, other than the number one records and they've had some documentaries and stuff released, the Beatles themselves haven't been a band for 40 years. But yet they still remain very, very relevant in the culture. I could see that sliding in this new, fast-paced, music expires within the month type of culture, especially if it's not available through streaming services. Now, it's on YouTube. It's crappy quality, but you can find it up there.
Yeah.
They need to hire Prince.
There you go. That'd be awesome. So let's...
Is that all the Apple news we have?
Is that all the Apple news we have?
No, there's one more story.
Oh, no. Oh, yes. Okay, well, here's the thing. This is going to be an interesting topic. So there's 2 things here that are, in my mind, these are connected. To others, they might not be as connected, but because I'm probably going to rant on and on, let's share what this is, and then I'll have my rant.
2 stories, seemingly unconnected. I actually had to ask you to explain how they're connected to me. So the rumor is that Apple will be introducing a high-resolution audio format, suspected to be involving the Lightning connector on the iOS devices. So the idea would be there's some kind of headphone that can connect through Lightning, or third-party manufacturers can make headphones that will connect through Lightning, which includes that digital to analog adapter, so that you could have high-quality audio, 24-bit, 192 kilohertz audio coming out of your phone and into your headphones, and actually changed from zeros and ones into wiggles of the air through this extra device that might be built into some headphones. And then, so that's the first story. The second story is that this is from Pro Tools, Pro-Tools-PC. They're talking about the impact of last-minute Pro Tools upgrades and planned obsolescence. So the idea that recording studios are spending insane amounts of money. I mean, to get one of these Pro Tools rigs back in the day cost more than like a nice luxury car, right? Like you were spending a Lexus to go 30, 40, 50K to get your Pro Tools HD rig with all of the expansion cards and add-ons, get all of your digital I/O set up. So they've kind of, there was a big article about what's happening since they've introduced new hardware. They're accepting trade-ins, and some music stores are saying we can't handle any more trade-ins. There's just hardware everywhere, and they showed some pictures of all of this kind of piling up in the corner, just Excel cards, stacked on top of each other, like it's trash.
Yeah, totally.
So connect those two stories for me, Chris.
Okay, so there's so the Pro Tools HD system has been around since 2003, I think. Was when the 192 was introduced, and basically, that those systems were a major leap in audio fidelity, in your ability to, at the studio or at a recording, be able to get a higher bandwidth, a better digital resolution. And that was literally, the reason why I can earmark this in 2003 is I was building a studio with a client, and we actually got one of the first Pro Tools HD rigs outside of Nashville, New York, or Los Angeles, which was kind of a weird feat, but in and of itself. But that was 2003. It was kind of early 2003, and we had I think we did 3 of those 192 interfaces and all the surrounding hardware and cards that you had to have, and yeah, it was a considerable investment. The tough thing is that consumer audio rates never graduated up. Like we are now the end of 2015, and nobody's really purchasing. Oh, okay, so Neil Young is saying that you can get these high resolution files through his.
It's available, and it's been available for a long time. There's hdfiles.natter.com or something. Sells for.
Yeah, but it's never been
popular.
It's never really caught on, and there's there are a number of audiophile geeks that will tell you that this is part of why music is being devalued, is because things have never evolved and they've never changed, never done anything. I liken this a little bit to setting this case up. You've got Avid. Which, Avid Digidesign, the same company, ownership, blah, blah, blah. They introduced this really high fidelity audio hardware for basically content creators to be able to capture. And it's delightful. It's wonderful. But it kind of sticks just to that crowd, to that audience, which is basically pro guys who can afford to do this. And I've known a crap ton of guys that, mortgaged everything and got into this, and they've got it paid off kind of, but they've tried to, every time something new comes out, you have to upgrade, and you got to stay current with Avid Digidesign stuff. The thing is that music, in terms of how they've managed to continually improve their product, right now I'm talking about consumers, is you haven't been able to really get anything better. I mean, yes, you can get something better than CD quality, but you really have to, it's hard to get. It's something that you have to make an effort to do. And talking, kind of revisiting that point about friction, and it's like, if you were able to deliver a better product in a simpler fashion, would it potentially catch on? Now, we can, the music industry likes to say, well, piracy is responsible for, why we've had such huge losses, and why, because anybody can copy our stuff. Well, the movie industry has had to battle that as well. They've had to deal with this, but the way that the movie business has dealt with it, and we can argue about, they've got more money at play, it's a different kind of economy of scale, but the movie industry has constantly tried to basically stay one step ahead of the pirates, is just continually make something better that can't be easily copied, that can't be easily ripped, can't be, so you have the proliferation of your suburban multiplexes now have at least one IMAX screen. We've got a couple of operations here in the Twin Cities that have Dolby Atmos sound systems, which are like 60-channel audio.
Sounds on the ceiling and comes down at you.
Yeah, it's a really immersive audio experience, and you have advances in 3D technology. So all of these things the movie industry has done to kind of improve itself, but the music industry's response was, it's unfair. There are pirates, and they've tried to go with different directions there to try and beat all of this. Here's where the Apple Play and the Avid DigiDesign stories converge for me, which is in order to deliver a product to a consumer in a simpler fashion, you have to kind of have the whole chain, just like we were discussing about this Apple Music thing. You know, if people already have your devices, you know what hardware they're running. You already have the delivery backbone in terms of you have their financial information as far as how they want to pay. You have their account information for security, and you know what their devices can do. You now have the whole backbone of running with it. The other side of it is Apple is not necessarily a company that innovates. Their biggest successes have always been the ability to take a product idea that maybe there's been one or two iterations of and refine it in such a way that we take the friction out of the equation. So Apple has this unique ability to be able to do something like, high resolution audio, it's available. And, we think that there's an X amount of our user base, our install base that will take advantage of this. Yeah, we could do it. And Avid, unfortunately, was way too early and doesn't have anything else other than the creator side. They can do X and they can get a ton of money from the small pool of people every year, but it can't compare to having, millions and millions of users who will give you a couple of extra pennies for a high resolution product.
Okay, so I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I disagree with you on a few points, but I think, generally we kind of see eye to eye on this. The thing with the HD hardware, and before that, Avid called their system TDM, right?
Yep.
So the idea was that technology on its own, like the computer that you're running your operating system on, isn't powerful enough for you to record that audio as well as put, say, reverb and compression and EQ on those tracks and be able to listen to it while you're recording it without any cutting out or latency, a delay when you're listening back. So the TDM software solved this problem by putting extra cards in the computer, which basically did some of that processing so your computer didn't have to. When the HD stuff came out, the expansion cards that did that processing became more powerful, as well as the features of recording in high definition audio. But very, very shortly afterwards, every other company that made similar products was offering that HD capability. I had a Mo2 interface at the time, an HD 192, that lets you do. Now, what Mo2 didn't do is offer the cards to put in your computer, the DSP processing that allow you to run the software inside of the computer. So the way that Avid has made their income and the reason that they are having some real financial trouble with Pro Tools right now is that they tried to lock you in to an end-to-end system similar to what Apple did, but not necessarily for your benefit. Because around 2004, 2005, computers started becoming so powerful, and today they certainly are powerful enough that you can run all of that extra software without the additional cards, but yet they're still trying to sell their add-on cards. Now, they did kind of backpedal a bit, and they put out their native system, their HD native, which are now obsolete again as they come up with another version of hardware. But I think that was really the selling point. You'd go to a studio, and you'd hear the engineers talk about why they loved Pro Tools, and it was never really, man, the fidelity of 192 kilohertz is just mind-blowing. It was, look at all these cool plugins you can run while you record, right? So this is getting a little bit outside of, the scope of just general music business, but I think that's kind of the failure. They had a similar reaction that the music industry had to, like, oh, well, let's see, the times are changing, but screw it. We're stuck with our business model. We are going to stay with these Excel cards for as long as possible and just drain our customers of as much money as possible. And eventually what happened is everyone woke up and went, hey, Logic's $200 and I can run this on the laptop that I already have. I can't even use a laptop for the longest time. You couldn't use a laptop with Pro Tools because unless you used their light version, which limited how many tracks you could play back at one time. So they've now removed a lot of those restrictions, but it's kind of too late, right? They're the industry standard. They're the Kleenex of audio recording. Your mom probably knows what Pro Tools is. but yet
She knows what autotune is.
that's right. They're losing their footing in the industry because of that. Now, moving into the HD audio, here's where we start to agree. I think that Apple is the brand, if anyone can do it, Apple is the brand that can say, here's the iPhone up until this point. This is the audio you've been hearing on the iPhone up until this point. Now with our new HD earpods, or whatever they're going to call them, audio is going to be 6 times higher fidelity. You're going to hear nuances that you've never heard before, and it's only available with our new earpod headphones and the next version of the iPhone. And it's something that differentiates it from, and there's been other smartphone manufacturers that have tried to do similar things, but no one really cared. But Apple is the marketing genius that can package this up in a way that makes it make sense to consumers and makes them understand. I think, to compare it to the movie industry, there's one huge technological issue that we didn't really discuss, and that's movies in 2003. I mean, we had broadband, but movies were like, 2, 3, 4 gigabytes to transmit over file sharing networks, whereas a song is like 3.5 megabytes. So back then, you had a real huge hurdle that the movie industry didn't really have to worry about, and they had enough foresight because of the music industry failing to take action. Like, oh crap, speeds are getting faster. Let's get some deals in place with Netflix and Hulu. Well, they created Hulu, right? The TV industry did, to kind of ward off BitTorrent and file sharing. And now that the speeds are here, no one really, sure, torrent sites still exist, but most people talk about their Netflix subscription. It's kind of just I think I just saw a stat that more houses than not have Netflix in the United States at this point. It's very, very commonplace that you'll find people streaming content to their television. So to compare apples to oranges, I mean, no pun intended there, but I don't think they really, I'm sure that pun has to be used on every single technology-based podcast in the world. But I don't think they really compare, right? But I do think that Apple's going to make a move into this HD audio thing. And now that we have the bandwidth deliverability, I said last week, like the consumers have chosen, they have decided that they don't really care about quality. But they're also they're very fickle. I mean, what they decided last week could easily change if the marketing is positioned. I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think I'm crazy here?
No, I don't think you're crazy at all. I think that the interesting thing is just in terms of how these might link is, I think we're talking around the same issue, which is basically like if you have if you basically can deliver something to the consumer without friction, you're able then to introduce newer products or more evolved products that will have a little bit more of a premium cost, but because you've already eliminated the barrier of getting it as a pain, it's just an easier thing to do. And Avid just doesn't stand a chance. We're only going to get faster. Folks, you're going to have to excuse me, but I've got like family in the house for the holidays, so it's kind of crazy over here. The tough thing is that if you can't deliver, if all you do is create something and it lives in its own little vacuum in the studio world, you're stuck. And obviously, DigiDesign Avid wasn't going to do a consumer-based anything, but they were going to have problems. And like you said, the difficult thing is they kept stringing people along, right? They introduced native, which obsoleted a bunch of stuff, and then now they're obsoleting everything, and frankly, I actually just a month ago signed up. I got their subscription plan, not because I wanted to, but because some projects that I'm starting to work on require that I open a session in Pro Tools, into which all I do is bounce out stems and open them in Ableton or Logic, which is kind of it just seems crazy that it's still a standard. At some point, I think it's going to cross and get even worse for DigiDesign Avid. And it's tough for me to have a high degree of sympathy. I've had friends that were employees of M Audio and DigiDesign and Avid, and they've done some consolidations that I think didn't make a lot of sense. And it's a corporate thing, and Avid's main business is not audio. It's it's picture,
Right.
right? It's movie, it's video. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I for one, I think high resolution is an awesome. I think it holds well. I think you're going to have an audience that might be more receptive to it. And it's one of those deals where you come at the top of the market and work your way down, so it might not be, for 5 years that it becomes like a widespread standard, but I think it could be a standard, that we see coming down the pike.
So we can maybe wrap up with this, but what resolution do you record at? Because I have never bothered to do anything beyond 44:1, maybe 48 if I'm doing something that's going to end up on video. But I think, if you got the impression that, oh, great, this new audio standard will come out, I can listen to all of my favorite records from the last 20 years at this new higher resolution, I think you're going to be sadly disappointed. What resolution do you record at? Maybe I'm wrong.
So, what resolution do I record at? Yeah, I'm a 44:1. Yeah, I'm a 44:1, 48 guy. However, nothing that I have done would I ever expect was going to go into something that was going to be this higher audio, would be potentially be sold to a higher audio consumer.
You got to imagine that when this comes out, there's going to be a little star next to each track, whether it's HD or not, right? And then if your track is not HD, it's going to potentially have a little less pull to the consumer. Well, I want to hear something that's going to take advantage of my new expensive hardware. So I would
the highest
assume,
I can go right now is 88. That's it. So, it's like I'm
which still would be considered high resolution. I think what you see happening a lot is there. And in fact, unfortunately, I'm not sure. I can't cite specific examples, but what I have heard is a lot of the HD tracks that are available now are simply the old masters or the digital files that were recorded at 16-bit or maybe 24-bit, 44:1, upsampled. So kind of like the overscan technology when you first got a DVD player or something. Like, we're just going to fill in the empty spaces with some bits so that it appears to be a 1080p file or something. Instead of that, it will appear to be high resolution audio. So there are upsampling plugins that you can get that will make your audio to the, if you're not, it'll get that tag. And if you're not an audiophile, you probably won't be able to tell the difference. And you can be misleading a lot of consumers. So I'm worried about that too. I think, will we see studios start recording in HD? Will we see people pulling out master tapes for stuff that was done on analog and resampling it at 192?
Man, those analog guys, they are going to own the business for a little bit, because really, I mean, that's what you're talking about is a very real problem, right? You're talking about basically somebody taking a digital thumbnail and blowing it up to a billboard and saying there's HD, and you're like,
right.
Well, wait a second, I see all this noise and aliasing in there. For me, yes, this does put some impetus to say, hey, I need to step up and I probably need to improve some hardware to deliver a better sampling.
And then maybe
rate.
Avid can sell you a product again that makes sense, right? No, I think modern computers could probably do it, but you got to realize, for the average person out there listening to this, if you're not an audio engineer, once you make that change from 44:1, which is kind of what we're all used to hearing, it's on CDs and MP3s, and you go up to this 192, well, that's putting 4x times the processing on your computer. So you're going to be able to do 1/4 of what you can currently do with your current setup. So people will need to upgrade their equipment. Your laptops won't quite be as robust as they once were. And then you go back and you think, well, is this really all worth it? Are the samples that I'm working from, if you're, say, building pop music and you're using virtual instruments, software instruments, are the samples originally, what resolution were they recorded at? Because then it's not going to matter anyway. So yeah, there's a whole host of problems that come along with this, which is probably a large part of the reason that no one's done it successfully so far.
Oh, this is just, it's a rat hole. What is going to ever, why are musicians, why is the music business always perpetually behind? Why couldn't we be the guys that came up with, hey, we've got 4K audio, No.
Well, 4K is kind of facing the same challenge right now, right? You can go to Walmart and get a really cheap 4K TV, but then you get home and it's like, what do I play on it? I mean, I guess Netflix has some Ultra HD content, but there's not a ton of stuff out there for, bleeding edge, cutting edge stuff. So the early adopters can kind of suffer through, and then the rest of us will catch on.
I said the same thing about Blu-ray, and it bit like so fast, like you just whipped your head. I knew somebody got a Blu-ray player when it was like, what was the other option? It was
DVD.
Yes. And someone got a Blu-ray player, and I swear it was like 9 months, and it was like, Blu-ray's it. That's the standard. So
yeah.
You never know. You never know.
Well, did you ever mess around with any of the the Super Audio CDs? I think Sony had a format out there in the early 2000s for, they could do, it's basically DVD quality audio. DVD is 96K. So they were making DVD quality audio masters of a few albums. It never really, this is back when people bought physical media. Never really caught on, but it was available. It's their last.
Did you play them in your DVD player then?
No, you have to buy a separate. Maybe you could. I bet if you look at those bullet points on the DVD player, it probably could play SACDs. So you've never even heard of this platform, then? I'm guessing.
I remember hearing about it.
Okay.
And I think I've seen some. I remember.
You would not be
seeing some
alone
in
if you hadn't heard about it. It wasn't. But they did sell standalone. I have a buddy who's an audiophile. He's the type of guy that goes and spends $5,000 on his tube headphone amplifier or whatever, like those real hardcore geeks about it. And he, back in the day, was telling me, you got to get SACD, you got to master all your stuff for SACD. And I was like, no one really cares about my, So
in my dad's day, it was quadraphonic sound.
Oh, yeah.
So.
All right. I think that's gonna wrap up this week's Weekly Music Business Show. Chris, want to tell us about where we can find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Drew Chowen, DREWCHOWEN.
All right, I waited to the third episode. What does Drew Chowen? You have to give me some. Just a hint. It'll be like cereal. Sprinkle in little bits of the story.
Little cryptic hints. There's a street 2 blocks from now. I grew up in a neighborhood that I have extremely fond memories of. Basically, Southwest Minneapolis. There's a neighborhood called Linden Hills. When I was a kid, it wasn't as upscale as it is now. In fact, it's radically upscale kind of now. But I lived on Drew, and the street behind me was Chowen. And for all of my fondness, I was pressed for a pseudonym in the mid to late 1990s because there was a project I was working on that I did not want to be associated with, and I was like, I told this act,
that's where the story is here.
That's where the story is. It was like, hey guys, you can just say produced by Drew Chowen. That's great. And it's one of those things. It's like you do it out of embarrassment, but I like the moniker, and it's stuck.
Yeah,
so
that's
anyway,
cool. I like
whatever.
that. Cool. You can find me on Twitter at David Swift, and I never tweet, but I'm going to start. I'm going to make a pledge for like the first 10 episodes of this show that I'm going to start tweeting, and then by episode 11, I will actually begin. All right. So I want to wish everyone out there listening a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever it is that you like to celebrate. Happy Festivus. No biases here. No Donald Trumpisms. I guess Donald Trump is bringing back Merry Christmas. I don't know if you heard that, but if he's president, everyone's going to start saying Merry Christmas again, regardless. I think Donald Trump is not. Before he was running for president, he was pretty much an atheist, but now he's running for president. Everyone's going to say Merry Christmas. So I will wish all of the WMBS listeners a Merry Christmas. And Drew Chowen.
Yes, happy holidays to you and yours. If you like the podcast, it'd be cool if you share, something with somebody else, tip them off to it, and hit subscribe in that, in all of those bins.
Just go to iTunes. Bins. iTunes, the important one. It'd be sweet if we could get on one of their charts. So you can tell your friends to subscribe. We're on everything, but go to iTunes. Even if you're subscribed on SoundCloud or something like that, go hit subscribe in iTunes for us. That'd be super awesome if you're getting any sort of enjoyment out of the show at all.
Or if you want to say, listen, these two babbling idiots.
It would be awesome to get some feedback too. So if you have any questions or stories for us, feel free to hit us up on Twitter. Again, Chris is at Drew Chowen. I am at Dave Swift. And that'll do it for this week's Weekly Music Business Show.
Dun-dun-dun.